Is it possible that some of the most fundamental assumptions shaping human knowledge for the past 250 years are not just wrong, but represent a dangerous pattern of linear thinking that's constraining our understanding across multiple disciplines? That this pattern has created false boundaries in our understanding of everything from geological processes to human development, and that breaking free from it might be the key to navigating the crises we face today? Since the late 1700s, we've been trapped in either-or thinking. In geology, it's gradualism versus catastrophism. Others involve the agricultural revolution that supposedly created civilization, or the cognitive revolution that allegedly made us human roughly 50,000 years ago. These aren't just academic debates, they're symptoms of what neuroscience identifies as left hemisphere dominant, linear processing that systematically misses the dynamic, integrated nature of real-world systems. I'm Jeremy, a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and this is the Ancestral Mind, where I examine archaeological evidence to reconstruct how early humans thought and viewed their world. However, the latest discoveries don't just contradict everything we've been taught, they demolish those assumptions entirely. And the implications reach far beyond archaeology into how we understand consciousness and ancient human development. Let's start with James Hutton, an 18th century Scottish farmer who became known as the father of modern geology. Hutton looked at the world around him and saw something revolutionary. That the same processes creating geological features today, erosion, sedimentation, volcanic activity, which had been operating for immense periods of time. This was the foundation of uniformitarianism. The present is the key to the past. This framework suggested Earth was vastly older than anyone had imagined, especially within European circles of the day, and that it operated like a perpetual motion machine, cycling through destruction and renewal. A valuable insight, but not without its limitations. Charles Lyell expanded on Hutton's work in his influential 1830s text, Principles of Geology, providing the foundation for modern geological science and directly influencing Charles Darwin's evolutionary thinking. But there was a problem. French naturalist Georges Cuvier was studying fossils in the Paris Basin and seeing something completely different. Sudden disappearances of entire species, abrupt changes in rock layers, clear evidence that catastrophic events had repeatedly reshaped life on Earth. Cuvier's catastrophism actually connected to humanity's oldest stories. Every culture on Earth preserves myths of great floods, cosmic fires, and world-ending events. Even Plato, 2,400 years ago, wrote about cyclical cosmic catastrophes that destroyed civilizations. But Cuvier's insights came during the Enlightenment and were quickly brushed aside in the broader efforts to move away from religious-related ideas towards observable data, despite the fact that his data was quite observable. So right here we see data that conflicted with those desired narratives. Fast forward to the present, and we're seeing hard evidence that's simultaneously demolishing these multiple revolutionary boundaries that never actually existed. Take the so-called cognitive revolution. We've been told humans suddenly became capable of symbolic thinking around 50,000 years ago. Not only is this unsupported in the paleontological data, in that brain volume growth far predates the time period in question, but the archaeological evidence is breaking this narrative as well. Blombos Cave, for example, in South Africa yields abstract engravings from 100,000 years ago. Kafsa Cave in Israel shows intentional burials with red ochre and marine shell beads from 92,000 years ago, with shells being transported 35 kilometers from the Mediterranean coast. And this is without taking into account Neanderthal cave paintings and carvings, now being dated back to well over 100,000 years ago. Göbekli Tepe dates to at least 12,000 years ago, showing astronomical knowledge so sophisticated that Martin Sweatman's statistical analysis suggests it commemorates a specific cosmic impact event that caused the Younger Dryas, a 1,200-year mini-ice age. Far from primitive symbolism, it's advanced scientific record-keeping, a structured record-keeping approach that has been traced back tens of thousands of years, at least so far. And that cosmic impact, Dr. Christopher Moore's 2024 research continues to affirm that around 12,800 years ago, fragments of a massive comet exploded in Earth's atmosphere over the northern ice cap, with platinum anomalies, shocked quartz, microspherals, and melt glass distributed across multiple continents. What's fascinating is how the converging evidence demolishes both the gradualism versus catastrophism debate and the cognitive revolution myth simultaneously. Our ancestors weren't just capable of symbolic thinking hundreds of thousands of years ago, they were sophisticated enough to encode memories of actual catastrophic events in cave paintings and limestone astronomical records. The pattern is unmistakable. The same linear thinking that created the gradualism versus catastrophism false choice also created artificial revolutionary boundaries in human development. But why does this pattern keep repeating? Neuroscience can help explain this in what hemisphere theory calls left hemisphere dominance. This is the left brain's tendency towards linear, categorical processing that excels in breaking things into parts but struggles with dynamic, interconnected systems. That interconnected, holistic view comes more from the right hemisphere. Each serves as an attentional resource, governing how we approach problems. And when we impose this either-or thinking onto complex reality, we create artificial boundaries where none exist. Of course, we need this form of attentional focus to interact with specific objects and people in our world. But this same perpetual phenomenon also makes us prone to self-deceptive and self-destructive behavior, both individually and collectively. Cultures across the world have consistently had to deal with this tricky balancing act, and ancient wisdom traditions understood this. They operated with more adaptive connectedness, recognizing cyclical and systemic rather than linear patterns, the nuance of multiple perceptive truths coexisting simultaneously. That's why their knowledge systems seem so sophisticated. They weren't constrained by the false boundaries that limit our modern thinking. David Graeber and David Wengrow's research in The Dawn of Everything reveals another false revolution, the agricultural revolution. Instead of farming suddenly appearing 10,000 years ago and immediately creating inequality, we see a 3,000 plus year gradual transition where people were essentially play farming, consciously choosing when and how to adopt agriculture. And all of this played out following the Younger Dryas impact and subsequent cooling period. Some societies seasonally alternated between hierarchical and egalitarian organizations. Others knew about agriculture but deliberately rejected it. Many practiced it for centuries, then abandoned it. The linear revolution narrative is pure fiction. These weren't primitive peoples stumbling towards civilization. They were conscious social experimenters with what Graeber and Wengrow identified as three fundamental freedoms: the freedom to move away, the freedom to disobey, and the freedom to create new social arrangements. So we see a clear pattern: gradualism versus catastrophism in geology, the agricultural revolution in social development, the cognitive revolution in human capability. These are all false boundaries created by the same linear thinking pattern. And interestingly, they're all traceable to the earliest days of the so-called Enlightenment period. Now, This reminds me of another false dichotomy that we've transcended in the biological sciences, nature versus nurture. We now understand that genetics and the environment interact dynamically. Epigenetics shows that experience literally alters gene expression, and these changes can pass to offspring. Nature and nurture aren't opposites, they're collaborative partners. The same integration applies everywhere. Modern geology needing to recognize both periods of gradual processes as well as catastrophic events. Just ask the dinosaurs or the peoples of Pompeii whether processes can be catastrophic. Evolution involves both steady natural selection and rapid bursts of new species after major changes. Think modern birds from ancient dinosaurs. Human societies develop through both incremental accumulation and sudden transformation. All changes are driven by survival payoff, regardless of the rate of change. But Dr. James Powell's 2024 analysis reveals resistance to this integrated understanding isn't just intellectual, it's institutional. Despite overwhelming evidence from dozens of sites and hundreds of researchers, academic institutions and researchers still resist paradigm-shifting ideas through systematic disparagement and career disincentives. This reflects the same left hemisphere dominance we see in individual thinking, but scaled up to the institutional level. Academic structures reward categorical thinking, incremental findings, and staying within established boundaries. They systematically punish broad, philosophically astute frameworks that integrate and reveal more complex systems. Which brings us to something even more profound. Recent research reveals that megalithic structures worldwide show measurable electromagnetic effects that alter brain states. Our ancestors weren't just sophisticated astronomers and social organizers. They understood something about consciousness itself. Through deeply connected participatory knowing, something our modern materialist conceptualizing paradigm, which focuses on thinking about stuff objectively as though we're not a part of the system, struggles to recognize. Sites like Göbekli Tepe don't just preserve astronomical knowledge, they're designed to alter consciousness. The same ancestors who could track cosmic cycles over millennia also understood how to create spaces that enhance human cognitive capabilities. This isn't mysticism, it's measurable science revealing the integrated nature of consciousness and physical reality. Now, taking this larger right hemispheric view, we can see the patterns of linear thinking that created the false boundaries that we've discussed. Gradualism and catastrophism, as well as myths of sudden revolutions in human development. Again, these aren't separate academic debates. They're symptoms of a fundamental cognitive constraint that has limited human understanding for centuries. The evidence is overwhelmingly consistent that human symbolic thinking developed continuously over hundreds of thousands of years, not suddenly. Agriculture as we know it emerged gradually through conscious experimentation over several thousand years. Geological processes involve both gradual change and catastrophic events. Social organization has always been a matter of conscious choice, rather than inevitable evolutionary progress towards modern society. The game change here is recognizing that the constraint isn't in reality, it's in how we think about reality. Left hemisphere dominance creates either-or categories with incredible certainty where dynamic integration actually exists. The ancestral mind operated with more integrated, perspective-based, and participatory knowledge systems, which is why their achievements seem so impossible from our segmented, mechanistic perspective. So what do you think? Is it possible to break free from these layers of conditioned thinking, operating from individual perception to collective cultural beliefs? What false dichotomy in your own field needs questioning? How might your personal challenges benefit from both and rather than either or thinking? And what would change if we approached societal problems with the integrated consciousness our ancestors demonstrated? The ancestral mind isn't lost. It's waiting to be accessed through the same integrated awareness that created the megalithic mysteries we're only now beginning to decode. And if you enjoyed this discussion, please consider liking the video and subscribing, maybe hitting the notification bell to see how far this rabbit hole really goes. Hope to see you there.